Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Pop Talks. Thank you for coming back to the official podcast of JPM Comics and Games. I am your co-host, Andy Foreman. I'm sitting here with my co-host,
Jason Cox. What?
And we're sitting here with our special guest, Mike Morano.
Hello, everybody.
He's a subscriber that's been coming in for a long time. We've been wanting to get you on the show ever since we started about 2 months ago. Yeah, it's 2 months in the making. We're also sitting here with Catherine, Mike's daughter, who she does not want to be on the show, but she could not miss her dad's debut on a podcast. So.
She's the audience.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Our
first live studio audience member.
Yes, you are. This is technically a live show now. This is a live episode.
Right.
I'm going to put that in the title.
We're performing.
Maybe, or I won't.
This is a performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Performance artists.
Yeah, thanks for stressing me out. If I shit my pants, it's your fault. If I vomit.
We won't blame Taco Bell. We'll blame
I didn't have Taco Bell today, so
okay.
we'll blame Rio Cafe.
Yeah, I mean, you still could have blamed Taco Bell.
I guess that's true. They're a bigger corporation.
We may want them to sponsor us someday, though, so let's not blame them.
Yeah.
So, hey, Frito-Lay. Tasty stuff.
So we wanted to get Mike on the podcast because he has a bunch of great stories of how he got into comic books. Just why don't you give them a little introduction?
Maybe not so great.
Yeah. He has a lot of
But wait,
stories.
let me digress a second, because I listened to the last show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And to prove that I listened, you guys really savage Star Wars.
We did our best. If we'd been talking about the original trilogy, it would have been very complimentary.
Well, of course, yeah. It would have been a very different show then. But yeah, I mean,
So for a future show, you're going to have to get somebody that really likes Star Wars, the pro Star Wars show.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
It may be tough to find somebody that falls into that camp. I don't know. There just aren't really that many people. I mean, who likes Star Wars these days?
It's not that big a deal.
It's so pedestrian.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know.
So,
It probably started nerddom, though. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Did it start with Star Wars?
Maybe Flash Gordon.
I mean, Star Trek was before that. That probably had a pretty faithful following. But I mean, comics though. Comics.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Probably way before that. But also, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings, and I feel like there's other stuff. Maybe, I don't know. It's definitely one of the earlier ones, and definitely one of the most like distilled and concentrated and very emphatic. Like, you know what I mean?
That's true.
They have some of the most hardcore fans of any fandom.
So why don't you tell us how you got into comics initially? Because you
here's
started in a
Here's the age difference, 60, 30, and 20, right?
Okay, yeah.
So when I was a kid, it was The Adventures of Superman, George Reeves.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about comics, but I used to watch The Adventures of Superman.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'd go outside and there'd be a bunch of little kids playing, and well, I was a little kid too, but we're all playing around. And we were on our we didn't have skateboards. We had roller skates, bicycles. Kids would put towels on their backs to be capes, and somebody would go, well, I'm going to be Superman. And then somebody would go, I'm going to be Supergirl.
Yeah.
I go, wait a minute. All I knew was The Adventures of Superman. There's only one Superman.
Yeah.
So, and then somebody would go, I'm going to be Super Cat. I go, wait a minute. There's no Super Cat.
Yeah.
And then somebody would say, I'm going to be Super Horse. Wait a minute. There's no Super Horse.
Little did you know.
Little did I know.
Mort Weisinger had you covered.
So one day we're at the store and I see a spinner rack full of comic books. And I see one that has Superman on it. So, wow, great. Superman. 12 cents. Comics were 12 cents back then.
Yeah.
So I picked up Superman, took it home. Sure enough, there's a Super Horse.
Just shaking your head the whole time.
But you know, Superman. When I saw him on TV, he's got a gray outfit, a gray cape, just two different tones. Now in the comics, it's 4 colors. So from there, go ahead.
Well, so you were like, I'm alive.
Yeah, right. You were like,
So
you're
I
like
thought,
Dorothy landing in Oz, and suddenly the world became color.
I thought, well, this is pretty cool. They have Superman comics. So next time we're at the store, maybe not the next time, but sometime later, there's Batman. And then when you open up the comics, there's an ad. It's got Superman, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern. There was Sugar and Spice, I think, which I never read. I don't even know who they were. But just different characters. So now, you see these ads and you get drawn in. So next, I get the Flash. I get Green Lantern. And it just kept going from there.
So it was just kind of this snowball effect.
It did snowball.
Yeah. It was your first addiction.
And, you know, probably. 7 years old, yeah.
Yeah, you're already addicted.
Yeah.
And they're 12 cents. For $1, you can get 8 books.
Oh, yeah. Right. Which would have been nice.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh my God! If I could get 8 books for $1, I'd be a lot richer right now.
Only when we sell them by the pound at JPM Comics and Games.
Yeah.
Located
on Route 66, right across the street from Donut Man.
Everybody knows where Donut Man is.
Yeah, so just come on right across.
Yeah.
So basically, you just kind of got hooked on them. That was it. Just started.
Yeah, pretty much. One led to another, and then to another, and then to another.
Yeah, but what kept you interested? Because the thing is, like back then, and I'm not saying this to like insult the medium or you really, but like back then, like kids would kind of grow out of them. Like they would even say like the age thing was like from 6 to 12.
Well, I did grow out of them.
Oh, for a while you put them down.
Gasp. You grew out of them?
Yeah, grew out of the comics that were being made in the 60s and the 70s. How could you?
Well, there was other stuff to do.
Yeah.
Well, wait, so
I guess women existed back then, so you
right.
probably had other things.
Wow.
They still exist today, Andrew.
Yeah.
So if you fell out with comics for a time and you went and did guy stuff and had for lack of a better term a life.
Yeah.
And then when about did you fall back into it? Was it did you trip and fall, or was it more of like a decided like, you know what I miss? Comics. I wonder if those are any good still.
I don't know what I read that well, this is in the 70s. I saw something. I must have seen. I remember seeing a book, The Shadow.
Oh.
Denny O'Neil, Mike Kaluta.
Yeah, the DC book.
And the cover, and the cover looked nice, and it wasn't new. It was I forget where I saw it. It was in a book box or something. Mm-hmm. I saw it, and I read that, and I got hooked on The Shadow.
Nice.
I didn't know who The Shadow was.
Okay, yeah.
But I got hooked on The Shadow, and then Jack Kirby came back to Marvel. That was in the 70s. That was the mid-70s.
Mm-hmm. So basically, when they started bringing in actual talent and interesting stories, was what you kind of
I guess so
drew you back in. Because I just think I'm not saying this to like insult the medium, but it's very understandable why people grew out of comics in that era like they very much were one and done. I mean, obviously there was the Marvel comics, which you can still go back to. I'd say even the earliest of like Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, all that stuff you can still read today, and it's still interesting, you know. But like if you talk about like DC comics, a lot of that stuff is so of its time that you can't. I mean, you can read it for fun, but there's like no storyline, there's no characters. A lot of it. You know?
Well, there wasn't ongoing stories.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
it was like episodic TV back then.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. It didn't have an ongoing thing.
Yeah, it had more of a disposable nature to it at that time, where it's just like, all right, I'm done reading this. I can, if you want, you could just throw it away.
Yeah,
it's not like you made such an
not that was bad. That's just the way it was then.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just think it's kind of weird because when I was the age you were when you started reading, so when I was like 6 or 7, it was like you'd pick up a comic. It's like part 3 of 12 or something.
Right,
you know?
right.
So it's just a total difference in how the stories were told back then. You know, there were no ongoing.
So first book, what got you started?
What got me started? Well, the cartoons, they're the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, the Superpowers ones. My dad got me the VHS tapes of them, but I got my dad's stack of comics, and it was Justice League of America. I forget the number, but on the cover, they had Superman standing outside of the jail cell, and all the Justice League members were inside of the jail cell in straitjackets. And he said, like, oh, I couldn't help it. They just went mad, or something like that. But that was back when they had all the faces along the side. And it would be like Superman, Batman, Black Canary. It was just like go. Like it would be like A-C. You know what I mean? Like I just
they had the roll call. Justice League had the roll call every issue. Even in the 60s.
Yeah, they would have like Green Arrow and the Atom. And I remember seeing the Atom was tiny, and he had a little tiny straitjacket on. And as a kid, that's like the coolest shit ever. Because you're like,
somebody's got a giant magnifying glass and like tiny little tweezers that they're like sewing together a little straitjacket for him.
The police department has a fucking tiny little straitjacket in case the Atom goes bad.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was probably in one of Batman's, backup plans, just in case.
So it's like right next to Kryptonite.
Yeah,
and right next
he's got a Kryptonite bullet.
And then a tiny straitjacket.
Yeah, just a itty bitty one.
Big disparity in how he dispatches superheroes.
Yeah.
And his plan. That was the easiest night of planning of Batman's entire life. When he's just like, tiny straitjacket.
I mean, it's easy planning, but the execution, how do you make a teeny tiny straitjacket? It can't be an easy feat.
I'm sure Alfred the butler had a hell of a time putting it together. I require a raise, Master Wayne.
Yeah. For my eye care, I can hardly see a thing.
So do you remember as an adult comics kind of maturing with you? Because, like, obviously in the 80s they brought in, there was the British invasion and there was the Sandman and Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns Frank Miller.
They've changed so much since then.
Yeah.
Just like movies, television, and everything else, they've changed so much. First, they've gotten a whole hell of a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
12 cents an issue. Then it went to 15, 20. I was kind of sore when it went up to 25. The annuals were 25 cents.
Yeah.
Now comics are 25 cents.
The annuals were, 60 pages, 80 pages?
Yeah.
That. Yeah.
And then 60 cents, 75 cents.
So it was really kind of a progression. Like, it was kind of a slow progression towards maturity. It wasn't just like you went to the stands one day and you were like, oh my God, comics are as old as, comics grew up with me.
Yeah.
That's kind of... comics weren't for me when I was a kid. Comics weren't being written for me. I grew up right around, the early 2000s. And they weren't being written for me. They weren't intended for, I guess bright colors kind of.
You weren't reading Punisher Max when you first got into comics?
Garth Ennis Punisher?
Yeah.
No, I was not reading The Punisher or Charlie Houston.
So you read Justice League. What hooked you?
I think it was the fact that it wasn't football.
It was an alternative. You're so punk rock, Andy.
Yeah,
we like sports in this house.
Awesome. I don't know. There's just something about the kind of the simplistic nature of the stories, but they don't feel like they're insulting you. At least those Hanna-Barbera cartoons. You look back on them now and they're so childlike and everything. But as a kid, like, I think we don't give kids enough credit. Like, kids can tell when something is just condescending.
Yeah.
And, like, I remember I would watch some of the, like, god-awful cartoons. Even the ones that were being made, like, for me, like, that were coming out in the 90s.
Yeah.
Aside from the Bruce Timm stuff, obviously. But there was just some, like, action cartoons that I just found, like, even as a kid, I was like, this is bad.
Yeah, a lot of those were just, like, cash grabs to sell action figures or video games or whatever,
That's all it was. They were commercials with characters.
Yeah, exactly.
There was something about superheroes. And I guess I had the good fortune of... because I've been into superheroes hardcore for as long as I can remember, but I think I had the good fortune of being able to watch Christopher Reeve's Superman the movie and, like, Michael Keaton's Batman and, watching stuff, watching products with superheroes in it that had some quality to them as opposed to just, the cash grab part of it. And, of course, we had the animated series was right around that time and everything,
definitely.
So, do you remember what kind of hooked you?
Yeah, well, I remember Batman the Animated Series. Fox had a Spider-Man cartoon as well. Superman, Batman Beyond, all that stuff. I didn't really start like collecting comics until I was like 15 or 16 when I like seriously started collecting comics. And at that point, I'd kind of figured out how it worked a little bit. Like, okay, these come out once a month and they're ongoing series. It's good to start at the beginning if you can. Yeah. And around the time that I was getting into it, Ultimates, Mark Miller was doing Ultimates. I think he was also doing Ultimate X-Men, right? So
yeah, well, that was when the Ultimate Universe really kicked off.
Yeah,
Ultimates was a great run too.
Ultimates and Ultimates 2 were really phenomenal. I would still recommend those to people. Ultimate X-Men was great because I was like, I would really like to get into X-Men, but I can't buy 7 different X-Men titles at a time. Like I'm on a limited allowance here as a child, so I can't really afford to get all of these books. And every time I tried to read X-Men, it was like, all right, and the story continues in New Mutants 103. I'm like, well, no, I'm not going to buy this other random series that I'm not interested in. I bought Uncanny X-Men because I want to read Uncanny X-Men. And then here comes Ultimate X-Men, which is everything you need to know from the ground up, starts in issue 1. There's not going to be any crossovers or tie-ins. It's just the one series. So yeah, I just started with a couple of Ultimates books and moved on from there to all the different stuff.
Did you collect them back then? Because obviously they weren't really like a collector's medium. We were talking about you just throw them in the bin.
Collect them. I just bought them and let them pile up.
Just hoarded them.
Pretty much.
Accumulated, I think, is the term we would prefer.
They were in stacks. They were in boxes.
Yeah.
You still have them?
I have some of them.
Nice.
A lot of them got stolen.
Oh no.
How'd that happen?
But this guy knew I was. he'd gotten divorced and he needed a place to stay, so I let him stay with me for a while. I didn't know he was going back in the shed stealing comics and selling them to a new and used bookstore.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Not okay, dude.
Then he fled when I found out.
Always choose comics over people. That's the way I see it. It's like if somebody's stealing your comics, there's no forgiveness for that.
No.
That's
one of the unforgivable sins.
Yeah, that's an unforgivable crime against you.
Yeah.
But at least you still have them. And the best part about them is like superheroes are a medium where you can kind of be introduced, but you can move up with it now, especially now with all the, I'm staring at our trade paperback wall and there's like the Sandman on there. Like you'd never give a kid the Sandman.
Yeah, that'd be that's a good way to mess up a kid, I think.
Yeah, but like once you hit about 12, 13 and you start to be like, I think I'm, moving up a little bit. Like I don't really, but, and it's right there for you, there's no, obviously, like you said, you kind of fell out of them, but that's because they were just intended for children.
I'm not even so sure about that. I mean, let's see. I think by the time I was reading Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Danny O'Neill and Neil
Which
Adams.
is a great run.
That was a great run.
Yeah.
I think I still have some of those, but I even bought the trades.
Yeah, but even that, you were saying like that was what kind of brought you back in, was when they started bringing in like actual people who wanted to be telling these stories.
The stories got better.
Yeah. Well, Marv Wolfman was talking about that era of comics, and he said this was the first time you had people writing comics who read comics as a kid, and he wanted to get into it. And he goes, before then, you would show up to the office in a suit and tie, and you would sit down at your desk and you'd type up the Superman story. And he goes, and now it's a bunch of long-haired hippies sitting around going like, it'd be awesome as if Green Arrow like went on a road trip with Green Lantern, and they had a little bit of expansion and a little bit of like brainstorming, and it was stuff, like people who had been passionate about it since they were kids. And I think any new medium kind of requires a generation to fully realize what it is, because you need people who are introduced through their childhood. You can't just have people where it's their job to make this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's even why you look at filmmakers like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. They were the ones that grew up on Buck Rogers and all that stuff, know, and like the Universal monster movies and stuff. Like it takes a generation to kind of really fully realize what a medium is capable of.
Well, it makes sense too if you think about it. Like, what better person to be crafting the stories that you're trying to get people interested in than the people who have been interested in these stories, you know, in the past. Like they're gonna know as an audience member, like, okay, well, I always liked it when, Batman would team up with Robin. Like, I just always liked having Robin there, so I'm gonna write a story that has Batman with Robin.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah, I want to tell this particular Robin story.
Yeah, exactly.
Where somebody, if it was their job to do it, they wouldn't necessarily. They'd be like, okay, it's like kind of looking at a soap opera. They're like, okay, this character, he's the sidekick, and he gets kidnapped. You know, whereas this one, it's like, oh, let's, maybe Robin can grow up. Maybe Dick Grayson can become Nightwing, and become his own character. But right around that time, what I found interesting is that like that's when Superman the movie hit too, and that really revolutionized comic books, because that's like the first time like a comic book product was like financially viable.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, really viable. Well, in the 60s, it was the Batman TV show.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because Batman was going to be canceled.
Yeah.
I read this years and years later. I didn't know this as a kid, but I read this years later. The Batman comic was going to be canceled because they didn't have any sales. And then they made the TV show. Batman went through a roof nationwide. What did they say? Batman, the Beatles, and Bond.
That was the 3 Bs of the 60s.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's kind of interesting to me is that they it requires an outside adaptation of comics to kind of bring comics back then, because like I said, like adults weren't going to go and pick up Batman and they're like, oh, he has a zebra suit this issue.
Right,
like, oh my god, he has a zebra suit. You know what I mean? It was sort of like you need
He's wearing a onesie.
Yeah, I think he wears a onesie in every one.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, depends on your definition of a onesie.
Yeah, spandex at least.
Yeah.
But do you remember when that hit? Did that kind of change?
What, the TV show?
Well, yeah, that.
Or the movie.
The Superman the movie. Was that kind of a turning point?
No, we were vacationing. We were going up the coast. One of the best vacations ever. We went up the coast, hit most of the cities up there, and when the Superman movie came out, we just happened to be in San Francisco, and we looked, and the line's not too long. Let's go see it.
And I'm assuming it blew your mind?
It was a great movie.
Yeah. Third favorite movie of all time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They got Siegel and Schuster their rights back.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
And a living. Neil Adams.
He fought for him.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's the start of the creators' rights and stuff like that, which you see
pretty much.
today,
And then in the 80s, Kirby was fighting Marvel to get his art back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's ugly.
I was telling you about that radio show I listened to called Hour 25.
Oh, yeah.
And the first time I'd heard about it, they had Jack Kirby as a guest.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pretty sore at Marvel. He was pretty sore at Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they wouldn't give him his art back.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Stan Lee in an interview was saying, like, he goes, like, I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Right,
because Stan Lee didn't, like, he even said when he got promoted to be president of Marvel, he was like, this sucks. Because it was business meetings and it was, like, 5-year plans for the company and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, I have no interest in this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure Stan Lee was probably just like, what are you talking about, the contract? I don't know.
Right,
like, I'm sure he doesn't
What are you talking about? I live in California now.
Yeah, right.
Don't bother me.
Just cashing checks. He's sitting back.
I couldn't give a shit. I don't care. Give them all back.
Give them all back, give none of them back. See if I care.
Yeah. Hangs up. Bam. But do you remember being a fan in that era? Was it kind of like looked down upon, or was it? Because obviously nerds rule the world.
It probably was.
Yeah.
Well, I told you I have this one friend. We went to high school together, and I don't think either one of us knew that we read comics until years later when we were talking about it. We talk every week now, but it was years later when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about some of the old comics back when we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea.
So that's like how hidden it was.
Yeah.
Was that people,
pretty much, yeah.
You didn't walk
around with comic book T-shirts on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you just like, oh my god?
There were no comic book shops then either.
Oh, yeah.
If you're going to buy comics, you're getting them off of at the newsstand, off of Spinner Rack.
Yeah.
Drugstore.
Yeah.
And they weren't necessarily new ones, but there was no such thing as comic book stores.
Yeah.
But then again, in the '60s, there were no video games.
Yeah.
There were no. Now
there's
now
no
you can
Wi-Fi.
sit around and watch. Yeah,
how'd you get on the
Wi-Fi.
internet?
Yeah.
In the '60s.
What was on YouTube at that time?
Yeah,
That was my
really.
favorite YouTube
They didn't have cat videos.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly they must have had cats. I mean, how do they not have cat videos?
No, the only cat video you would make is you'd grab a cat and spin it on the table on your own.
But back then, you had to invite your friends over to watch your cat in person.
Yeah,
watch
right.
They do something funny. Watch this.
Guys, check it out. Okay, it's not doing it now, but I mean, if you guys want to hang out.
No, we were out on roller skates, bicycles,
cruise
toy
around.
guns, playing Army.
Yeah, with a comic rolled up in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Not even that.
Yeah.
Had to keep them nice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And you can't let people know that you're
Didn't
reading
have bags
them
and boards.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Man.
What are those?
Oof.
That's
So
so uncivilized.
So yeah, comics weren't collectibles then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just reading material like magazines.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just disposable and well, I mean, that's obviously why they're worth so much now. Is
right.
Like, dogs would just chew them up and they'd be thrown in a ditch somewhere. Or,
just find a pile of them in the woods.
Did you ever read? I remember reading this. You guys probably have. World War II.
Oh yeah.
Comics were so disposable. The reason why they were so rare now is because they had paper drives for the war effort.
Right. Yeah. You could pulp your comics and help the war effort, and that's why there's not that many Action Comics. They printed a bajillion of them, but not that many still exist today because it was just like, oh, well, I mean, this is as disposable as the next thing made of paper, so let's get rid of it, recycle it.
And then in the 50s, they had churches burning them because everybody was all freaked out that they were turning kids into communists.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Seduction of the innocent.
Yeah. Frederick Wertham. Frick.
Yeah. He had some ideas.
Yeah.
Not good ones. Just
ideas.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can still get that book, Seduction of the Innocent.
Probably. Why do you think they would ban it or something?
No,
but
I'm
they're going to make
like,
zealots out of people?
Think about how many books that were printed in that era that you can't get anymore. All these pulp books that just go by the wayside and nobody reads anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that wasn't necessarily I don't know. It may be harder to find, but it's probably not entirely. It's probably out of print, but I'm sure you could probably find it. I'd be surprised if it was even a collectible.
I would love to have that.
Yeah,
just
that
as
would
a
actually
piece
be pretty
of comics
awesome.
history. I'd love to read it and see like what points he makes because I only hear like in documentaries what he says.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah,
I've read about it.
Yeah, I would like to read Seduction of the Innocent and actually hear what he was saying. And it's so cool that back in the day, like, well, not cool, but like back in the day, like it was so non-mainstream that you could claim that Superman was a fascist and people would just be like, All right.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
That seems about right.
But it's the same thing. Like, I'm a big Marilyn Manson fan. I'm just big into Marilyn Manson.
We can tell by looking at you. I mean, just look at Andy. Yeah. He's clearly a huge Manson fan.
In case anybody doesn't know, I'm wearing makeup and lipstick, and my nails are painted right now. But no, I'm a big Marilyn Manson fan. But in the '90s, he wasn't mainstream at all. Like, nobody knew who Marilyn Manson was, so they could just come out and say Marilyn Manson is turning kids into school shooters, and people would be like, okay, because nobody knows about it.
Well, it's better than blaming me, so
yeah,
said America.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it was so nobody knew anything about it that you could just kind of go and they're teaching kids to be communists.
Sure, yeah. Well, and I would be surprised. He wasn't making stuff up per se. I'm sure that he was finding things that backed up what he was saying, but I mean, you can do that with just about anything that has enough content. You know?
Exactly.
You could probably just make up an argument for just about anything that you want to, out of if you've got something with 100 volumes that's been coming out for decades, and you just pick out see this part where the hero turns into a werewolf, and that's promoting werewolfism.
Yeah.
And this is a form of bestiality, or something like that. Yeah. Something weird like that.
You can just make up shit.
Anybody can turn anything into anything.
Yeah, you can connect those dots however you want.
What just occurred to me? For the three of us, we all looked at comics and we came in from some other medium. It was some other medium that pointed that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. Because
cartoons.
Cartoons.
Yeah. Adventures of Superman.
Yeah, and the movies too. Those are the main influence.
Yeah.
If I had just been watching those cartoons, I would not be as into comics as I was today. I'll freely admit that.
Oh yeah.
But that Superman the movie, those first two, and that Michael Keaton Batman just blew my mind. I was like, oh my god, this is the greatest movie ever created in the history of the world.
Yeah. It led to things like bat nipples and.
Yeah, really.
But
it sure went downhill from there, didn't it?
Yeah.
Until the 21st century.
Yeah.
The characters though are so versatile that you can kind of adapt them to any medium, and it's and it works. You know what I mean?
And that's one great thing. We probably discussed it a lot in the first episode. How it's they can continue to evolve with their surroundings, and oftentimes that's what you'll find in the arts and in whether it's literature or music or history or whatever, is that they kind of reflect the times and the sensibilities of people as
they keep building and building and building and building.
Yeah, and it keeps. That's what I think is interesting about comics, is you can keep it moving.
Mm-hmm.
The characters. There's a very there's a box you have to play in. Clark Kent has to be Superman. And you have to have Lois Lane in the Daily Planet and all that. But you can kind of work within that box to make it as interesting as you can. And I'm not saying comics are limited in what they can do. They're some of the most creatively diverse characters ever created.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's interesting how you can kind of bend these characters how you want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love making the point of Superman the movie is a terrible representation of Superman comics at that time.
Mm-hmm.
If Richard Donner had adapted the Superman comics at that time, it would have been a shit movie.
Yeah.
Because he would have blown out like a crappy CGI sun.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Or he would have been, you know what I mean? He would have been juggling tents in a circus or something to help, poor...
The blind orphan school or something like that in downtown Metropolis.
I don't really remember much of the comics at that time when Superman came out.
Yeah. They were very sci-fi heavy.
Okay.
Because that's what was the thing
probably.
Of the 60s.
Well, even in the 50s, Batman was fighting bug-eyed monsters.
Yeah. Flying saucers and ray guns.
Yeah, flying saucers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's this mere mortal standing up to these, otherworldly forces.
Yeah.
That makes
smarter.
sense.
He's just smarter than all of them.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So what was it like to see comics kind of blow up as a actual popular medium, as opposed to just
to go mainstream from
as opposed to something that you could be into and your best friend could be into, and neither of you would know until years later.
Until he moves across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was it
was
like?
the movies. Well, it was the movies that did it.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Michael Keaton Batman. That was a huge film when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that made comics cool. Bookstore. There were a lot more bookstores.
Mm-hmm. They started collecting them in trades at that point.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and also, just there being comic book stores, would have helped with that too. Like the fact that comic shops actually started popping up by then.
Yeah.
And actually go somewhere that specializes in this. You don't have to just happen upon them while you're, getting bread and milk or whatever.
It was probably the mid-'80s the first time I had seen a comic book shop.
Okay.
And the only reason why I knew is because they had characters. It was Gary's bookstore, the guy I told you about before.
Yeah.
He had characters painted on the side of the wall on the outside.
Yeah.
And okay, that looks interesting. I'm gonna have to go in and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd walked into a comic book store.
And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
This is a thing.
All these boxes, all this paper.
Yeah.
But that has to be cool though for something you've been into for so long to finally be like legitimate.
Mainstream.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have felt just so validated.
Yeah.
You're like, I knew it. I was always right about this.
All those, yeah. Take that, girl in high school.
Yeah, right. Think that friends that berated me when they found my comics stacked up under my bed.
Hey, at least you had the excuse that they weren't legitimate back then. They're they're the most popular thing in the world, and I still couldn't get any girls in high school, so I don't even have that excuse.
It's almost like there's something else standing in the way, Andy.
Yeah, it's almost like there's something wrong with me as a person.
You mean it's not comics?
Don't look too deeply into the void, Andy.
I won't like what looks bad. It'll just be a big nose reflection of myself.
It's just you.
Yeah, a pale big nose reflection of myself.
Help me!
Nah, help me! Yeah.
Well, there were more things than that, though.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as legitimizing comics, yeah, I guess so. It's probably the Batman movie, Superman movie, Batman movie.
Yeah. They did the Flash show around that time. I don't think that had nearly the impact that the Batman movie did.
Probably
but it was still,
last.
you saw the Flash on television.
Yeah.
That had to be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any like favorite?
I recorded those on videotape.
Yeah.
I just threw those things away.
Yeah.
I never watched them again.
Oh, I have them on DVD.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm that's why I threw them away. They're on DVD and they're much better copies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have them now.
They take up less space.
I remember watching the pilot on my trip to Washington. It was an airplane to Seattle. I downloaded it on my iPod Classic, so it was on like it's even old now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Andy, what's an iPod?
Yeah, it was like 7 years ago.
You sound
now.
so old.
But it was like literally like not even a baseball card size screen that I watched the pilot of the John Wesley Shipp Flash show on, and I was thoroughly entertained.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
And this is way before your time too.
Oh yeah,
you've got a lot of history and a lot of a lot of backstory.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't have any friends, you kind of. Nah, I'm kidding. I have friends, but it was just. I'd always been interested in it.
Yeah.
You know, I was always that kid on the bench at recess that would be reading his comics and drawing his own comics, and you know. It always appealed to me. I think it just is a kind of a bug that kind of appeals to certain kids that just have a natural inclination towards like kind of creative storytelling and stuff.
And there's so much to it that if you have the appetite for it, you can just keep going deeper and deeper into it. You know, it's so deep and so wide, and it's been around for so long. And yeah, you could just study it your whole life and still not know everything there is to know about comics. And
especially now.
Yeah.
Oh
right.
my god. Yeah. Now it's like an avalanche every week. You know, but it's great. It's amazing that it's progressed this far from like 6-month-old issues on the spinner rack.
Yeah.
And they're like, "You want a comic, kid?" Drag on that cigar.
And the only thing when we were kids, there was just the Adventures of Superman. That was it.
Yeah.
On Saturday morning cartoons, it was Mighty Mouse, Heckle and Jekyll.
Yeah. Heckle and Jekyll.
Which would probably get like comics
Which I'm
adaptations.
surprised you even know.
Yeah, I know a slight bit about it.
Yeah.
I knew a little bit about the property known as Heckle and Jekyll.
Vaguely culturally aware.
I'm vaguely familiar with this property you refer to as Heckle and Mr. Jekyll. If you asked me that as a kid, I'd probably be like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nerd.
Robert Louis Stevenson, nerd.
Why don't you go read
Welcome
a book?
to today's edition of Nerd-O-Rama.
Yeah. Do you have any like favorite memories of comic books though? Like one time they really times in your life where they really stuck out to you as like important to you, or because obviously comics are a hobby, but they go like a lot deeper than that. Like the reason you stay addicted to comics because they kind of personally appeal to you on kind of a deeper level. And I know that sounds kind of sappy to say, but it is true. Like characters like Spider-Man and Superman kind of appeal to me beyond. Oh, they can lift a car over their head. You know?
Look how bright these colors are.
Yeah, exactly. I could take LSD for that.
Well, yeah.
Or just drink a lot of hooch.
Yeah, shine a black light on things.
Oh, yeah. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Moonshine.
But do you remember when they really stuck out to you as, like,
The O'Neil Adams run on Green Arrow and Green Lantern was a really good run. I always liked that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I haven't read it in a long time. I don't know how it would hold up today.
Yeah.
I'm reading it right now.
Are you?
I bought the trade.
Okay, let me know what you think.
It holds up. It's really good. The kind of the social commentary is even better than I think it's done today. If I'm being honest, because you grew up in this time of the '60s, were a time of huge social change, and everything was changing in the '60s.
But I was too young to pay attention to that.
Right? Yeah.
I didn't care.
But that was when all of this stuff was sort of being done, and I feel like it was handled. Even though I feel storytelling in comics has progressed since then, I feel like them handling certain issues was actually handled much better back then.
Yeah.
Isn't that?
Well, there was the
wrong?
Peter Parker drug issues, or the Spider-Man drug issues.
Right. They got rid of the Comic Code Authority seal of approval on that one.
Yeah.
Because the Comics Code Authority was like, you can't do that. And they're like, all right, well, we'll just do it without your approval then.
Yeah. What a waste, huh?
Marvel were rock stars.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The Marvel comics were always good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was kind of what brought comics back. They kind of saved Marvel comics.
Yeah, that's true. They were probably more popular.
Yeah, well, because you had a little more diversity than just like, grown men, mostly affluent, fighting crime or whatever. You had like, until Amazing Spider-Man, they didn't have teenage heroes at that time. Like they were all, they have to be sidekicks, stuff like that.
So after the Batman TV show came out, then everybody was doing superheroes. Saturday morning was superheroes. Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four. So I would imagine that puts Spider-Man on the map, or it kind of puts Spider-Man on the map.
Oh yeah. That cartoon is still stuck out in everybody's heads. I used to watch it as a kid. I loved it as a kid.
Everybody knows the song.
Yeah.
Sing a few bars.
I'm not
Hum a few bars.
No, I don't want my laptop to just crack. It is my ringtone. I will say that. It's my ringtone and my alarm. So when I set my alarm in the morning to go to school, that's when I'm waking up to.
Is it like polyphonic, like an old phone where it's like...
That was an option, but I just have the song.
There you go.
So
Spider Pig on the Simpsons movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That explains a lot about me, though. It's just I wake up every morning to the Spider-Man theme. It's just sort of like...
The end of every dream is you web-slinging away.
Yeah.
You just wake up in your Spider-Man underoos. You're like, I made it back.
Thankfully, there are no webs.
Yeah, hopefully.
That was actually going to be a scene in James Cameron's Spider-Man movie.
Oh.
Where he wakes up and he's webbed the bed.
Wow.
That's a thing. I've read the script. He pulls, they describe it, he pulls up the covers and all the webs are underneath the sheets, like he's webbed to the bed. And I'm just like...
Tasteless.
What are you talking about? It's real.
Yeah, right. James Cameron's in there, he's just like, this is going to be awesome, guys.
We actually get to film this. Leo's going to have to do this.
Yeah.
They wanted Leonardo DiCaprio back in the day.
And he would have crushed it.
Yeah, I would have watched it.
Yeah.
I still want... That's one of those alternate universe movies where I'm glad they didn't make it, but, like, I wish I could see an alternate universe where that happened.
Yeah.
Let's
go to that parallel timeline.
Yeah, it's up there with, like...
Man of Tomorrow.
Well, Superman Lives.
Yeah.
The Kevin Smith one. Like, I wish I could see these movies. I'm glad they didn't happen. But I wish somewhere there was, like, a way to watch these movies.
Yeah. We'll figure out interdimensional travel at some point.
Oh yeah,
it exists somewhere in the multiverse.
Or time travel, and you could just
grab
Tim Burton by the shoulders, and make the fucking.
Just go back in time with a bunch of money and just be like, here you go.
Yeah,
make the movie.
Make a cartoon of it. Make a really bad cartoon.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Do you remember when comics really stuck out to you as like important to you, or like they kind of?
Like I said, I got into Ultimates at that time, and that was just after I was kind of like, hey, maybe I can actually like get into comics. 'Cause, I'd watch the animated series and stuff like that. I was a big fan of that stuff. It was probably around then. See, I had a friend that introduced me to comics mostly, like, and that was that was definitely a big part of like collecting and getting into it. Was like now I have a person to talk to about this, and we can like have conversations like each week as new stuff comes out and be like, oh yeah, did you read this one? Oh yeah, this was cool. And did you read that one? Yeah, it was awful. So glad I bought it.
Yeah,
stuff like that. So it was it was probably around that time. And there's a little bit of a revival around that time that Ultimates came out. And then just a couple of years after that was let's see, Jeff Johns was working on stuff like Flash and Justice Society of America. Identity Crisis came out, and a while later we had 52, or 52 came out weekly with like some of the best comics writers in the business. We're working on that one. Infinite Crisis, that kind of thing. But yeah, Identity Crisis definitely just changed my perspective on comics because it builds an actual world with actual people in it. It's not just dudes who put on costumes and go fight crime. Yeah. It's people that share holidays and have backyard barbecues for birthdays and that kind of thing. They all know each other outside of crime fighting.
Yeah, it's real beyond the standard. Of
right.
Something happened in your life, you got to put on a leotard and fight crime.
Yeah, right. It's not all about their weird tragedy that made them compulsively dress up and go and punch out criminals or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, kind of to get into the next part of the conversation, do you think comics have improved since you were reading them? Or
yeah,
you do.
If nothing else, in quality. Look at the coloring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like storytelling has expanded a lot more, and I know there are people that'll be like, "Oh, they'll never talk." Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, right.
But I feel like storytelling and just the way these kind of like narratives unfold is a little bit more is a little bit better handled today. But everything is of its time.
Right. Yeah.
You watch, like you were saying, watch television and movies at the same time that these older comics are coming out. Yeah. They're kind of clunky too, most
right.
of them.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll be comparable.
Yeah.
So much doesn't hold up nowadays.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like a lot of stuff does hold up because it is of the time. A lot of people can't watch things with the context of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can watch Superman or The Adventures of. I mean, I'll just say this: you cannot binge George Reeves' Superman show. That would be very difficult to binge that. But I feel like if you watched one episode and you were like, "This is of the '50s," this is like it's very charming in the context of when it was made.
Yeah. Well, and also at the time, it was not designed to be binged, so that's one thing to keep in mind.
It was not designed to be watched again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We're
exactly.
never, Back to the Future. What's a rerun?
Yeah.
It was
totally
designed to be watched again. It's literally one of those things where if like. They would maybe air it once, and that was it. And it would go into some vault at some. That would be it.
But then years later they'd rerun it on Channel 9, and some people would discover it because they hadn't seen it the first time around.
Yeah.
And then it would catch on and take off. That's what happened with a lot of the old shows back then. Star Trek, it happened with Star Trek.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, Star Trek is kind of the first like cultural revolution of like the audience perpetuating the product because Star Trek came and it went. And it was just the show. It was Wagon Train in Space.
Yeah.
And the reruns, everybody was watching the reruns and brought it back.
But the fans were so into it that you literally got this huge budget motion picture. I mean, it's not exactly.
And that was out of Star Wars.
Yeah. But that is true. Star Wars.
No, that's what happened. Star Wars came out and everybody loved it, made science fiction popular.
Yeah.
And then Paramount said, hey, wait a minute, we got something too. Let's make a movie.
But if the fans hadn't kept it alive.
Yeah.
And this was really the 60s was kind of, I feel like 60s was the beginning of fan culture because back in the the 40s and the 50s, like you said, you would grow out of it and you would just kind of dispose of a lot of this stuff. Yeah. This was the first time that people looked at it and they were like, wait, this kind of has meaning to it. And that coincides with the younger generation taking over, you know, all of us.
Well, also Stan Lee in the 60s when he was promoting all of the things in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
He was quite a promoter.
Well, I mean, he was the
still
first.
is, but I mean, he was a promoter.
Well, he was the first one to also see this like serialized format and go, well, I can make something out of this beyond story of the week.
Yeah.
I can kind of
come and join this club that nobody knows about.
Yeah, it was great. And as a kid, even like because I was a kid in the early 2000s, so it was not like it was like a hidden thing. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and Bryan Singer's X-Men were out. Like, they were huge.
Yeah.
But it did feel like something that was yours that nobody else knew about. You could, go to school and nobody else knew about comics, and you could kind of go home. You had all your action figures and all your comics, and it was this world that you could return to.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what, I was watching this show on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us, which if anybody hasn't seen it, watch it. It's actually really good. And it's about production of classic toy lines.
Yeah.
Obviously the first one they do, Kenner Star Wars. But what I found really interesting was one of the guys who was involved in I forget what his name was and what his job was because I only watched the episode once.
Right.
But he did say something that stuck out to me where he was talking about the Star Wars action figures, and he goes, I like to think that there were kids who maybe didn't have a great time in school and they maybe probably didn't like it a lot and maybe they had a particularly bad day at school. but they could go home to Luke Skywalker, and they could go home to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this was kind of what they had to go home to.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this in a way of, like, I was never bullied. Like, I'm not trying to perpetuate that vibe, but it was one of those things where, like, as a kid, this was yours, and it was wholly yours. You know, it's not anything. You know, nobody can tell you anything about this world because you know everything about it, and nobody else knows about it.
The action figures specifically, like, they don't come with an instruction manual. You know, like, you're not doing it wrong if you've got Luke Skywalker, you know, fighting with your Joker toy, or, you know, whatever. Like, you can just make up an entire universe, and it's yours. It's coming out of your mind.
Yeah.
One of my friends who's a lot younger, he's in his 40s, and probably the golden age. They had the golden age of comics, the silver age of comics. But basically, for all of us, the golden age is 12 years old.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. It's that line from Stand By Me where it says, like, I never had any friends like I did when I was 12. Does anyone? Yeah. Same thing with your hobbies. Yeah. Like, I was never as into this as I was, you know. Being a comic book fan is almost like chasing that childhood high.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why when they grow up with you, it feels so vindicating, you know. I really felt this with Logan when it came out this year. Where, like, I had to beg my grandpa to take me to the library to rent the first X-Men on VHS. And for the longest time, my mom was like, don't show it to him. Wolverine will scare him or whatever. Yeah. Like, because, you know, like, being 3 years old, maybe you shouldn't watch the X-Men.
Yeah, Australians are scary, man.
Yeah. Yeah, but, like, you know, maybe a 3-year-old shouldn't be watching that first X-Men movie. There's some, like, parts where people get killed and stuff. But, like, I got to watch it. Yeah. And it just... it clicks and you're hooked forever. But here it is 17 years later, and I'm watching this, like, legitimately, like, Oscar-worthy X-Men movie, you know, and it grows up with you. That's just one example of how this stuff grows up with you. But, you know, like, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, you know, you get into the Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson Swamp Thing, which are very, like, horror-driven, just kind of man turned into monster fighting other monsters. But then you get to Alan Moore's, and it's like, no, I'm about to blow your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, here's what this could be.
Yeah, you know. And that's what's great about comics is it starts with this very simple premise and just blows out into there, you know, into whatever the individual author wants it to be.
Yeah, because again, there's some rules, but you can break them.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like there's nothing really boxing you in.
As Ed Brubaker's Captain America run showed us, you know, everybody's like, you're crazy. You could never do a Captain America run without Steve Rogers. Yeah. He's like, I'll do it. It's
Watch
me. It's one of the best Captain America runs ever, you know, or the best, you know.
He's a really good writer, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Man Who Laughs is an awesome Joker story. I think that's what it's called. It's
I haven't read that one.
Doug.
I didn't even know he did that.
Oh, Doug Monk. Yeah, that's, no, it's not The Man Who Laughs. That's the Dark Knight's Metal tie-in. The Batman Who Laughs. That's,
no, The Man Who Laughs.
I think it's, oh, yeah, you might be right.
It's the Joker one.
Over there on the shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be right.
I think it's The Man Who Laughs. I remember buying it from here when I was like in my 7th grade.
It's on the spinner rack over there.
Yeah, it's a great book. But, you know, you can kind of... And again, Ed Brubaker was a comics kid, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And he kind of grew up and he's like, you know what? Captain America died and Bucky took over, you know? And that's what I love is that the next generation kind of builds on what the last one built.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, like you said, we're like, as fans, we're sort of building these universes in our minds as we're reading and stuff like, oh, what if this happened, or what if these two characters met, or oh, when they did this with Batman it was cool, but what if they did it with Flash, or, you know, stuff like that. So these things are kind of, you know, in the back of your mind sort of formulating, and then when you get the opportunity to be a comics writer, and then it's like, oh, I can actually do this, like, it's allowed. I can give form to the ideas that I've been coming up with all this time.
So that had to be cool though, watching it in real time, kind of move on like this.
You know, I never even thought about it that way. But yeah, I guess so.
You've got to see it progress and mature.
Yeah.
You know?
Those 3 volumes that I was telling you about, they had at Costco, the Golden Age of Comics, the Silver Age. I haven't read them yet, but the Silver Age of Comics, that was the age that I grew up. What is it for you? There was Bronze. This has got to be after Bronze. What is it now?
The Millennium Age? I don't know.
I don't know if they've really given it a...
The Modern Age.
Not, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's really a title for it yet, at least not one that I'm aware of. Yeah.
That's just the modern age.
The plastic age, probably.
The computer age.
Yeah. So that had to be cool, though, watching it progress into the modern age, and now it is this, like, super respected.
You know, I never really thought of it that way, but I guess so.
Yeah, there are graphic novels that are on Time bestseller now.
Right, yeah.
You know
and the difference is, back in the 60s, there wasn't a whole lot to choose from. Right. I mean, there were a lot of comic books, and they were 12 cents, so you can afford to check out comics like the Doom Patrol.
Yes.
Nowadays, you're not going to because it's $3 or $4.
Yeah.
But, Sergeant Fury.
Yeah, the cheapness
The
of
westerns,
them almost
they even had
encouraged
westerns.
experimentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You can
Yeah.
afford to experiment at 12 cents a book.
Now we have the
and
internet.
probably as a publisher also, it's like, well, I mean, they're not that expensive to make, so yeah, let's just make a bunch of different ones. Yeah, let's do some romance
Somebody will buy
books.
'em.
Let's do some western
Yeah,
books.
somebody will
let's,
buy them.
Yeah,
let's make a Robin Hood one, you know, like
Yeah.
whatever.
Some kid on vacation is gonna buy them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So.
That's when I bought my first Marvel books. We were on vacation.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Greatest vacation ever, I'm assuming.
Well, I showed you that Spider-Man 6 that I had.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The first Spider-Man book.
Oh yeah.
And Stan Lee signed it.
And what'd you say to him?
I said, what did I say? Oh, yeah, I said, thanks, man. I feel like I'm 8 years old again.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of chuckled.
And that's so special to be
Yeah.
able to have Stan Lee here, because he's seen it progress too. He was the one that made
Right.
it progress.
Yeah.
He literally was pushing that boulder up the hill while
Right.
you all stood there going, "Go, Stan, go!"
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it wasn't just him.
Throwing 12 cents at a time at
Yeah,
him.
yeah, throwing your nickels at him,
Yeah.
going like, "Go, Stan!" or
Show us a little
dimes,
more.
actually. Yeah, come on, let's go, giant sized man thing, Stan. Let's get this moving.
Right. We're
Yeah.
ready for it.
Yeah, but that's interesting to me though,
Yeah.
just seeing it progress like
Mhm.
that.
I just thought of something. My wife still hasn't forgiven me for taking her to see Conan the Barbarian.
The Arnold Schwarzenegger one?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was gonna say
I didn't even like Schwarzenegger. I just wanted to see the movie.
Yeah.
I was gonna say though, if it was the Jason Momoa one, she
That-
shouldn't forgive you for that one. I mean, it had Rachel Nichols in it, but whatever.
Yeah, it did have that.
Yeah.
It had that small bit going
But
for
I would
it.
say, like, I would understand if she never forgave you for that one. But
Yeah, no, the Schwarzenegger one's good.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things about it that you could like.
oh yeah, like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on,
Yeah.
that's my best. That's the best impression you're gonna get out of me
What's
tonight.
best in life, Conan?
Yeah.
You know, the only Schwarzenegger movies I actually liked were Terminator 2 and True Lies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are classics.
I mean,
though.
I love Predator.
Yeah, Predator's pretty great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
True Lies is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
a
that
lot
was
to
a good
like
movie.
about that one.
Yeah.
I mean, Jingle All the Way, of course. You know.
I love
Which
Jingle.
one?
I love Jingle All the Way.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, it's a classic.
You're not missing anything.
It's a
What's that?
classic. It's a classic. I love it.
Difference nowadays, there's so many movies, so many books to choose from, you
Right.
can't even follow them all.
Yeah.
No, there's no.
Well, and not to mention they take so much less effort than, going to a store and buying a comic or getting a subscription or whatever, and then you have to, like, take it out and use your brain to read it. Like, who wants to do that with their free time? Like, I just want to kick back and just have a glowing screen in front of me that feeds me all the information like an infant.
I can watch Captain America just beat up aliens
Yeah.
on my TV screen. I don't have to read about it
Or
anymore.
you can go on YouTube and watch more cat videos.
Yeah. I find it more special though that I do feel that comics are this kind of they still are kind of hidden in a way.
Yeah,
Because there's a lot of
absolutely,
people
yeah,
that are. I mean, the medium itself is the biggest thing in the world right now, but the comics themselves, like, you don't see a lot of people reading them. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
there's the whole section of Barnes and Noble and all that
Right.
stuff, but in a way, reading comics still is kind of a special thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, just reading at all is just way less common. Like, there's not a whole lot of people reading for pleasure. Most of us are trying to find ways around reading so that life can be a little bit.
If you go,
quicker.
if you have to wait anywhere, if you're at a doctor's office or a line for anything, everybody's looking on their phone.
Right. Yeah.
I'm probably the only one that ever walks into a doctor's office with a hardcover novel.
Mm-hmm.
With a comic book.
No, a hardcover novel.
Oh, I was gonna say somebody would be like nerd. The pharmacist like nerd.
Oh, there's like a 6-year-old, and they're like,
Nerd, I'm watching porn on this thing right now.
So mom's like, what? Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stop him. So.
Yeah. Joffrey sets his own boundaries, so he'll figure it out.
Yeah, he'll be fine. He knows what's good for him.
Oh, go ahead and put those earbuds in, though, honey.
Wouldn't happen with an Asian mom.
Yeah, at least put the earbuds in though. I like that. He's just sitting in the thing, watching it with like, it's just playing and everybody's just sitting there. Mike peeks up from behind his hardcover novel.
Yeah.
Is that a Lisa Ann video I hear?
Yeah, but just reading for pleasure and going to the effort of like getting into this stuff. And that's the thing is like everybody knows about superheroes and they kind of always have, since they came about. A lot of people have a general knowledge of these things, but if you read the comics and you know some of the history and stuff like that, it's like, oh, you know a little bit more. Like that's the kind of the magic of it. It's like you've got this hidden knowledge, or what for the most part is hidden knowledge about stuff that like everybody knows a bit about it, but a lot of them, their information is about an inch deep. Whereas if you go any deeper than that,
I imagine it was looked down a lot more in the 60s and 70s.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Because
not now.
Because nobody accepted it as like storytelling.
Yeah, it's like legitimate
words
art
and pictures.
Yeah. It was just. I mean, Stan Lee talks about how his publisher was like, oh, just don't have them have connected stories. Don't have ongoing stories. People aren't going to care. Just keep doing the same old thing. And that's what led to Fantastic Four. Is he got so frustrated that he was like, well, I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it. If I get fired, I don't really care because he wasn't passionate about it at the time. About what he was writing.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, you kind of have to move on.
Yeah.
Like I have comics. The way the comics are right now, they're not going to be this way in 5 years or even 10 years.
Yeah.
Like it's going to keep moving on and on and on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It has to keep up, or else it dies.
Yeah.
Which and it'll undulate. It'll be on a sine curve where it'll have peaks and valleys. But yeah, it's still going to be around because there's always going to be. Sometimes people will say stuff like, oh well, wonder how long there's going to be like actual comics, or it's all going to go digital someday. And I don't know.
We were talking about that years ago when Kevin was standing behind the counter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily will, just because like there's always going to be somebody that remembers buying a comic and opening a comic and feeling the pages and smelling the ink, and like there's so much about it that's tactile.
People are like that with novels.
Yeah. Me
totally.
With books. I don't have a Kindle. I don't do anything digital when it comes to reading. I don't do anything digital when it comes to watching movies or TV. Well, I guess I have Netflix, but like I collect all my movies.
Sure. Yeah. You have a hard copy of it. You're not always. Yeah. You're not only streaming stuff that you actually care about. Yeah. Which makes sense.
And then like vinyl still exists.
Right, exactly. That's what I kind of think of is like at the very least, even if for the most, like if the vast majority of comics go digital, there's still going to be this tiny little market where people are like, nah, I'm going to keep collecting them. I want to have a hardcover, a hard copy of this. I want to be able to like tangibly read it or whatever and have a collection of it. Yeah. I don't want to have to worry about, my account getting hacked and I lose everything or drop my phone in the tub or whatever.
To me, there's nothing kind of rewarding about looking at your phone and seeing how many things you've downloaded.
Yeah,
you're kind of like, oh, okay. But when you look at this giant stack of comics, and you're just like, hell
and then you've got more room.
Exactly.
You've got more room. Your garage is full. Your mom tells you to throw them away.
No, you just build extensions to your home using long boxes. Come on, guys. Like they're basically building blocks.
Yeah, it's not that you just replace your bed with long boxes. Just throw the mattress on top of them.
Exactly. I mean, that works.
Yeah.
Instead of having storage under the bed, storage is the bed.
Speaking of stacks of comics, I've told you the story, but I don't think I've told you the story. When I was a kid, one time, one of my friends and I, we were in my room, we started wrestling, and it started getting a lot rough, and as we're wrestling, he picks me up and he runs me right into the wall, right into one of my bedroom walls, full force, puts my butt through the wall. And so, and it's drywall, right? So there's a hole in the wall, and we looked at each other. We've gone too far now. We look at each other. Oh man, what am I going to do if my mom comes in here? I started rearranging all my furniture. Nothing was. He had picked me up, over his shoulders. So it was a pretty high hole. There was no furniture that I could cover that hole with. So I'm moving stuff around. Finally, I put the tallest dresser. I got 2 big stacks of comics.
Nice.
I packed them up in front of that hole. My mom didn't find that hole for 3 years.
So comics also saved your ass.
Yeah, comics saved the day.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have a Raquel Welch poster to put on the wall.
I didn't even have any posters.
Yeah.
Your mom is in there. This whole thing is a conspiracy. Throwing the rock.
She was after me for 3 years ago. When are you going to take these? Put those books away. Take those books down.
I'll get around to it, Mom.
Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, I swear.
Can't now.
Can't now. I still haven't figured out how to spackle.
Yeah, right.
I'm 12.
Really. Probably 11 years old. I didn't know what spackle was.
Yeah, you don't have any idea of how to fix it. Or paint over it to make it look...
Just had to cover it up.
You're coming out of your room when you're 16 years old and you got painter's overalls on. You got a big rolling brush and you're like, nothing's going on in there, Mom, as you're finally patching it up.
Nothing to see here, nothing to see here.
Why does it smell like paint in here?
Yeah. Just huffing it, Mom.
I was just huffing.
Yeah. So comics not only saved your ass, they saved you from boredom, but they also actually saved your ass from a hole that was made
about 3 years.
From a hole that was made by your ass.
For about 3 years.
It at least delayed the effects for a few years.
Talk about covering your ass, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, technically, your ass got you into that mess in the first place. So
Yeah. Wouldn't be the first or the last time an ass got him into a mess. I couldn't resist. I apologize.
Brought to you by our sponsor, Taco Bell.
Yeah. Brought to you by our sponsor, asses.
Is there anything they can't sit on?
Yeah. I wish I would have some posters.
Yeah,
that
right.
would have been great.
I mean, even just a pin up in your comics that you could have pulled out and just
really?
Stapled to the wall or something would have been handy.
Take down that Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, really. Are those Playboy fold-outs?
Yeah.
Centerfolds?
Yeah.
You'd have to have like 3 of them over it.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, thank you for coming on, though.
Yeah.
Like,
has it been over an hour now?
I don't know. What time is it? I don't even know. Oh, it's like, yeah, I think it's.
Well,
been
see,
about
I failed one thing. I told Pat I was going to do the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and she was very supportive. She said, "Just don't make a fool of yourself."
Oh, well. I mean,
I guess that story did it. That last story did it.
That's up for the listeners to decide.
Yeah, well, I mean, really, though, it's up for her to decide, right? I mean,
she probably won't listen.
Well, perfect. Then,
hi, Pat.
Yeah, gold star. Yeah.
You should hear the stuff he was telling us.
Hi, Pat. Great show, right?
You should hear the stuff he was telling us off air. No. But thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting.
So next time, there's got to be a music show, right?
Oh, yeah.
Chicks in the Comic Book show, or Chicks in the Comic Shop show.
We'll do
that could go, but that could go south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could go south real quick. 20 minutes. 20 minutes in the show. Can we go? We're really tired.
Yeah.
Would you buy us dinner? You said you'd buy us dinner.
Yeah.
We don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We were promised dinner.
Yeah. Can you unlock the door, please?
Yeah, exactly.
We want to get out of here.
The guy in the corner is kind of creeping us out.
Yeah. Why doesn't he talk? Just looking at us.
Listen, we're using his laptop to record this thing. Just deal with it as I'm sitting here all
It's
day.
a non-profit podcast for crying out loud.
Yeah,
right. You know what?
Oh God, dude, we're gonna be trending on Twitter. It's gonna be like, allegedly the co-hosts of Pop Talks lock them into the store as they recorded a podcast. And
Prove it.
Yeah, that'll be the last episode.
Yeah, right. The final episode.
Yeah.
No, but there's 3 ideas right there: the music show, Chicks in the Comic Book, people that like Star Wars, someone that likes Star Wars.
Someone. Yeah. There's got to be someone out there.
When we do
Maybe
a Star
they're listening
Trek
right now.
episode, you're coming back on.
Oh yeah.
You know what you should do? Have the background sound effects.
Oh, Star Trek?
Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Star Trek.
I'm not that
Have
good
the background sound effects.
And
there is
a YouTube. Edit.
There's a YouTube video with that.
Yeah, that would require putting effort into this, though.
Oh, that's true.
Classic millennial.
Yeah.
Cheaply done podcast.
Yeah. This is the 12-cent podcast. We'll eventually move up, and it'll be just the same way that comics progress.
Yeah. And you turn this off and find out you didn't record a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going. It should be fine. Anyway, but thank you for coming on, though. This was really cool.
It was fun.
Yeah. And we would love to have you back.
Yes.
So, and we would love all of you to come back. Thank you. We appreciate you coming back. But we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.